Right now, Prince Harry is back in the UK. This isn't just a friendly visit or a trip to feel better. This is a man who once broke all his bridges with his family, now suddenly running back across them. Think about that. This is the same Harry who told everyone on TV that his own family was mean. The same man who made millions of dollars by saying the royal family system was broken. The same man who left behind royal protection, royal quietness, and royal power, saying he didn't need any of it. But now, things are different. People don't go back to places they hate unless something has gone very wrong. People don't run back to groups they called bad unless those groups are the only ones strong enough to keep them safe. This wasn't about saying sorry or being proud. This was about being very scared. Whatever problem Harry is dealing with now can't be fixed by a fancy helper in California. It's not something he can just talk about on a show, and it definitely won't go away with a nice-sounding public statement. When someone who loudly said they didn't want to be quiet suddenly wants to be quiet again, it means they are afraid of what will happen when people start talking. And people have already started talking. The reason for that fear starts thousands of miles away, in a jail cell in Florida. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for 20 years. Her fancy social life is gone. Her power is gone. Her future is already set in a hard, difficult way, and that's exactly why she is dangerous. Now, here's a simple truth. People stay quiet when being quiet still helps them, when they still have friends, when they still have power, when they still have hope. Maxwell has none of that. According to the story behind this, she has started talking. Not in soft whispers, not in unclear hints, but by saying real names. Names of people who were in the same important circles she once controlled with Jeffrey Epstein. And when someone like her decides to speak, the bad results don't start on social media. They start with secret phone calls, urgent meetings, quick flights, and fast decisions. Because what someone says in court doesn't care about good reputations. It doesn't care about made-up stories, and once words are spoken in private, they don't stay private for long. Somewhere in those conversations, one name supposedly caused a big stir, strong enough to reach all the way to Montecito, California. And that's when this stopped being a gossip problem and became a serious problem about staying safe. To understand why those names are important, you have to understand how Jeffrey Epstein's world really worked. Epstein wasn't just rich, and Maxwell wasn't just a fancy lady. She was like a doorkeeper. She knew who should be in which room, who got to go in and who stayed out of sight. She knew where powerful men relaxed, how they moved around, and who was put near them. This wasn't like a Hollywood red carpet event. This was quiet power, private rooms. No cameras, no recordings, no papers showing what happened. And that's why being close to these things matters. Not because everyone in those rooms did bad things, but because being there means seeing things, hearing things, noticing how things usually happened. And memories don't just disappear over time. They wait. When bad things were happening, there were people in those places who weren't accused of anything, but they were there. And in legal terms, sometimes just being there is enough to make people ask questions. That's the kind of world Ghislaine Maxwell helped create. A world that looked fancy on the outside and was dangerous on the inside. A world where being quiet protected powerful people for many years. And now that quietness is no longer helping. On the outside, Soho House looks harmless. Stylish rooms, soft lights, creative people drinking and pretending they're not trying to meet important contacts. It's a private club for artists, filmmakers, and designers. That's what the advertisements say. But behind the scenes, Soho House had a different purpose. It was like a hallway, a quiet path between different worlds that usually don't mix in the open. Hollywood people met rich money people. New rich people met old powerful people. People who loved attention met people who tried to avoid it at all costs. This wasn't where big deals were announced. It was where they were quietly agreed upon. Openings weren't just random parties. They were carefully set up to feel exciting when powerful guests arrived. The right feeling, the right people, the right faces in the room. Because being important doesn't happen on red carpets. It happens in private places where nothing is written down. And once you understand that, you start to see Soho House not as a party place, but as a system, a place where access was quietly controlled, and where being there didn't mean being famous, it meant being useful. That hallway matters because once different worlds start mixing, they don't always stay separate. Before royal palaces and royal news, Meghan Markle was moving through that hallway. According to the story, she was flown to different countries for Soho House openings, including one in Istanbul in 2015. She wasn't the main star of the event. She wasn't the big name people came to see. She had a quieter job, what people inside call social filler. Now, that sounds like an insult, but it's not. Social filler has a purpose. It's someone who fills empty seats, makes conversations easier, and makes a room feel lively before the really important people arrive. It's a role that doesn't get you in the spotlight, but it gives you access. What caught people's attention wasn't just that she was there. It was the lifestyle that came with it. International flights, fancy places to stay, always moving around, not just once or twice, but all the time. And this is where the numbers quietly didn't make sense. At that time, she was an actress in a supporting role on a TV show. She was comfortable, sure, but having a super rich, jet-setting lifestyle, not usually. No one accused her of doing anything wrong. That would have been inappropriate in those groups. Instead, people did something much quieter. They noticed. Here's the thing about memory. It doesn't need answers right away. Back then, coworkers didn't gossip. They didn't whisper. They didn't confront. They simply remembered. Because when something doesn't quite make sense, your brain doesn't get scared. It waits. And memory is patient. Years later, when that same woman is standing next to a prince, wearing a fancy title, waving from palace balconies, memory suddenly makes sense. And with that understanding, old observations don't disappear. They change their meaning. This is where the story changes. Because once royalty is involved, the past doesn't get erased. It gets managed. And people who once stayed quiet start thinking back to rooms they were in, trips they heard about, connections they didn't question at the time. Not because they were jealous, not because they were mean, but because it made sense. This wasn't about making up rumors later. This was about small details waiting for the right moment to become important. And once that moment came, the questions didn't need to be said out loud to feel important. Because now those memories weren't just interesting, they were very important. At this point, it would be easy to pretend this story is special. It's not. Royal families have dealt with difficult pasts before, and they don't do it by pretending those pasts never happened. They do it by handling them quietly. Take Princess Sofia. Before she married into the Swedish royal family, she had a known past as a glamour model and in fancy party circles, supposedly being near places connected to Epstein as early as 2005. Once she became a royal, that past didn't disappear. People just stopped talking about it. Then there's Mette Marit of Norway, who publicly said sorry in 2019 for being friends with Jeffrey Epstein, saying it was bad judgment. She apologized, the story ended, and the royal family moved on. This isn't about shame, it's about how systems work. Royal families take in history. They hold it. They hide it under fancy events, duties, and quietness. Once a royal title is involved, the goal isn't just truth, it's keeping things stable. And once you see that pattern, Meghan's story doesn't seem like a one-off. It starts to look familiar, not shocking, but planned. Then came the moment when everything changed from just being curious to something much more serious. During the legal case brought by Virginia Giuffre, the woman whose statements eventually ruined Prince Andrew's public image, Meghan Markle's name almost came up in court, not as someone accused of a crime, but as a witness. That difference is important. Witnesses aren't accused of crimes. They are people who might have seen something, heard something, or been there during times that later became important. According to court papers, there were 3 reasons her name was thought about. First, she lived in the United States, which made it easy for legal action. Second, she was described as being very close to Prince Andrew during a certain time, not just a casual friend. And third, she was said to have been in Jeffrey Epstein's social world during the years when bad things were happening. In the end, she wasn't called to testify, but the harm wasn't in the final decision. It was in the fact that investigators, who had the power to demand information, looked at her past and believed there was something worth asking about. Once that happens, curiosity turns into danger. If anyone still thinks this is just about gossip, they only need to look at Prince Andrew. Andrew didn't lose his good standing because of gossip magazines. He lost it because of what people said in court, because of sworn statements. Because once questions were asked under oath, his fairy tale quickly fell apart. That's how scandals actually end. Not with headlines, but with official records. Andrew became the example royal families study when things go wrong. The proof that being quiet can protect you for years, until it can't. And once the legal process starts, no amount of public relations strategy is strong enough to put the problem back where it started. That's the lesson Harry understands very well. Because once court statements start being made, it doesn't matter who you are or who your wife is. And that's when being scared stops being overly emotional and starts being logical. Which brings us back to Prince Harry. He didn't return to the UK to be forgiven. He didn't return for old memories. He returned because the royal family knows how to survive scandals that don't end with gossip, but begin with court statements. They have lawyers, problem solvers, rules, and hundreds of years of experience making problems smaller instead of letting them explode. Harry walked away from all of that. He called it cruel. He called it bad. He broke it all apart publicly. And now, for the first time, he might need it more than ever. Because if Ghislaine Maxwell keeps talking, this doesn't end with opinion articles. It ends with questions asked under oath. And there's one question that is bigger than all the rest. What did Harry know? And when did he know it? If he knew about his wife's past, then he helped hide it. If he didn't, then he walked blindly into a danger that now threatens everything he built. Either way, the fairy tale is over. This was never about jealousy, or gossip magazines, or rumors. It was always about who was in the room and how long silence was allowed to protect powerful people.